good? You good? Give
Yeah.
it up for Jemima, everybody. Woo!
All right. Excellent. Well, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Tejas, again. Hi, everyone. I'm Jemima. Let's talk about JavaScript. Oh, yeah. Honestly, I feel like if after all this the talk isn't great, it's like, well, what was the point? I should have left. Okay, let's get into it. So the title of this talk is I Can't Believe It's Not JavaScript. And when I came up with this title, I realized it's actually an American thing. I don't know, has anybody heard of I Can't Believe It's Not Butter? Yeah, exactly. I was like, I was like, where did I get that thing from? It's Americans. They're always infiltrating your mind when you don't know. So yeah, I can't believe it's not JavaScript. In this talk, we're going to be looking at things that look like they were built with JavaScript, but they weren't. So yeah, this is me, yada yada yada. I already told you all of that. And then if you want to find me anywhere on social media, that is at Jemima Abu, and then that's LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever. So let's get into it. Now, before we can talk about why we don't want to use JavaScript, let's talk about why JavaScript was created in the first place, because I think that'll really help us understand why we shouldn't be using it the way we're using it right now. In the beginning, there was the web. And the web was a simple place. Kind of like that, you know? We didn't have a lot going on, but it did what it needed to do. It passed information across, people could use it to communicate with their friends, stuff like that. And that was great, because before JavaScript, all websites were static. What this means was if you go on, well, you know how they had like those fever dream websites where it kind of looked like they had like the marquees and the space theme? Yeah, but it was still static in itself. So before JavaScript, all websites had just the information displayed on the page, and that was it. Now, the reason this was a problem was because if you wanted to do something called form validation, so for example, you had a form on your page, a user can put in their email and their password, and then it says, oh, wrong email. Back then, they had to send that password and email to an actual server, and then the server would respond and be like, oh no, this is the wrong email. And you're using dial-up internet in the first place, so it wasn't even fast. So you're waiting 1 minute to go to the server, 1 minute to hear back from the server, and then it was taking a very long time. Also, I'm paraphrasing all this. I don't think I was alive when that happened, so I don't, if you guys were, you know if I'm saying the truth or not, but me personally can't relate. So this was a problem for a company called Netscape. Basically, Netscape wanted a faster way to make sure their users don't have to wait for a server response and then come back. So they came up with the idea of a language that could handle client-side validation. What this meant was that before the email is even sent to the server, you can just do the validation on the front end. So for example, I'll say, oh, this is not a valid format for an email, or I don't know, whatever else client validation is done. And so they contracted someone called Brendan H. to build this language for them. And so JavaScript was built in 10 days by Brendan H. And when I heard this, I was like, this makes sense. JavaScript of all languages would be built in 10 days. It's, it's very apparent. Well, basically, so this language, it was created to support the browser, meaning that instead of a user having to wait for client-server validation, it was just created to support HTML and CSS and return responses quicker. The issue now, as we can see at this React conference, is that we have gone from JavaScript supporting the web to JavaScript running the web. So now you can't even have a website. If you're building a React website, you can't even have a website without JavaScript anymore. So this brings us to our current predicament. Should we actually be using as much JavaScript as we are using in the current stage? For example, 98.9% of all websites on the internet currently use JavaScript in one form or another, which means that if you're the kind of person that you browse without JavaScript, which if you are, I would love to talk to you after, how is that life going? But if you are the kind of person, it means 98.9% of the web is inaccessible to you. And this brings us to what I like to call dependency gate, and I love telling this story. Let's get into it, it's great actually because we're at a React conference, so this is very specific for you guys. Basically, in 2016, or as I like to call it, the day the internet crashed. Do you guys, anybody here know NPM Manager? Is that a familiar thing to you? Great, right. So what happened was there was this little developer, I don't know if it was Lisa, I've never met the guy, there was this developer called Azure, right? Now, Azure was a guy that liked publishing packages on NPM, and as anybody has gone on NPM before, you know, they're not very discerning with who can publish a package there. You can have like a add to package, and they'll let you install that, and people can download your package to add to their numbers for whatever reason. Azar wasn't creating add-to packages. I'm sure he was doing great packages and was having a lot of fun with them. So Azar was a guy on NPM who was creating multiple packages. One of his packages happened to be called Kick, that is K-I-K. There was also a social media at that time called Kick. So Kick basically goes to Azar and they're like, bruh, you need to take your package down because it's using our name. And Azar was like, F you guys, you don't owe me, I'm not going to take my package down. So Kick goes to NPM and they're like, NPM, tell that guy to take his package down. NPM goes to Azar, and they're like, Azar, take the freaking package down. And Azar is like, fine, but if I'm taking that package down, I'm taking all my packages down. So he very dramatically like deletes his entire package registry on NPM, and then he goes away. This would have been fine and all, but for some reason, a couple of minutes later, we suddenly have a bunch of websites all over the world crashing. We're talking Spotify, we're talking Netflix, we're talking Facebook, and ironically, we're talking Kick. Why did this happen? Basically, what happened was Azar had this tiny little package called LeftPad that was published on NPM. LeftPad was a package that added spaces between characters. And when I heard that, I was like, what's in the lazy? Why do you need a package that adds spaces before characters? But somebody did. So this somebody installed LeftPad in their package, right? And their package was installed somewhere else, and that was installed somewhere else, until somehow it ended up being installed in React. So basically, what this meant was now, whenever anybody is trying to run a React application, they're getting an error, LeftPad can't be found. People at Facebook are freaking out. They're losing their freaking minds. They're like, what is LeftPad? We've never heard of this before. That is what we like to call dependency gates. Because you're installing a package and you have no idea what's in that package, there's like millions of other packages installed. Have you guys ever actually looked at your node modules, or do you just install it and then ignore it? Right? You're just installing whatever in your applications and you don't actually know what it is. So basically, this LeftPad package that one developer deleted from NPM somehow ended up affecting millions of websites that ran on React. That is a problem. So this is what we like to call dependency gate. Basically, what that means is that when you are creating programs or when you're creating applications, you want to ensure that at some level, you are sure of what your program has or what your application is running. But it was all resolved very nicely. Like NPM basically had to go beg Azure to undelete his package, and then they made a rule where you can no longer delete things, you can only depreciate them, which was great and all, but it wasn't great for anybody that worked at Facebook for those 2 hours, so haha. Well, basically, that is the point. The point is we have gotten to a stage where we are so dependent on JavaScript, or we're so, JavaScript is so necessary to web development that we can't have websites without it. And this is the stage I want us to go back to. JavaScript's original intention was to be a supporting language to HTML, meaning that JavaScript is intended to make HTML functional. But when it comes to displaying content or handling content, anything that displays actual content to the page, think of it this way. If you printed out your page, would you be able to read all the content on the screen if there was no JavaScript on the paper? That is the stage we should be aiming to get to with our websites. We want to ensure that content is always accessible to users, because at the end of the day, that is the purpose of a website, to display content to users. This is very ironic at a React conference, because there's no way you guys are running your websites without JavaScript, but for me anyway, it's fine. But yeah, let's get into it. We're basically going to be looking at a few demos and examples of certain features that we may build using JavaScript right now that don't actually need to be built using JavaScript. The first of which is a theme switcher. A theme switcher is a great thing for most developers, because if you love a dark mode, you want to make sure you can use that on your website. So this is a simple theme switcher built with, I don't know, whatever. We'll see the demo. This is the demo. Also, this is the fun part of my slides. You guys will have to bear with me here. I do not know how to put code in slides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be clicking these links and going back and forth between CodePen. So I will be viewing the links the same time as you. I think it'll be fun, but let's see. Fingers crossed it works, because clearly, if this doesn't work, I have to end my talk here, because literally everything else is just the slides. So let's see. Huzzah! It worked. Okay. This is how we're going to have to view this. Now, this is our theme switcher that uses JavaScript. Yay! Ignore me moving all these things around. Focus on the theme switcher. Yeah. And let's zoom in there. I did already have all these set up on my laptop, so it would have been a lot less toggling. Take my word for it, I was prepared. Anyway. So this is what a theme switcher looks like with JavaScript. You just click a button and it toggles between light and dark. And then this is the code here. It's just a simple code that's checking if the toggle is checked, give it a class name, and then we pass in all the things, blah, blah, blah. Now, what if I told you we could build this exact same theme feature without any JavaScript at all? Oh, yeah. Intriguing. So let's look at how we would do that. This is our CSS. Dun, 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 dun. Clicked. Now, this is our same theme switcher. Just so you guys see that I'm telling the truth. Drag that. Whatever, you can see there's no JavaScript here, right? Ta-da! What? That's crazy! All right, thank you. I like how I'm taking credit for this. Like I had anything building it. I didn't. I just made the demo. Like the actual features. There are some very smart people at Google that came up with that. But yeah, let's take a look at what is actually happening behind the code. So like we've said, this is our JavaScript code, right? It's just checking if the toggle is checked on true and then adding a class name. This is how, this is also the React version of the code. Have you guys ever tried to implement a theme switcher in React? It's weirdly complicated for no reason. Why do I need 2 different files? Why do I need a context? Why do I need global state management to toggle a theme? If anyone has a shorter way of handling theme switchers in React, please come talk to me, because I'm like, what the heck is all of this? Anyway, whatever. This is React, boo. And this is how we achieve that exact same effect using one line of CSS. This code right here, the body has. Has is a new pseudo selector in CSS that lets you target certain CSS elements. So basically what's happening in this line, I'm saying is, if the body has the input that has the ID theme switcher as checked, passing my dark mode styling. So now let's go back to that code that we had originally. Let's drag that down. So this is where all the magic happens, basically. All I'm doing is check, let me zoom in a bit if you guys can't see that. All I'm doing is checking if the input with theme switcher is clicked, and if it's clicked, I'm updating all these root variables here, and that is exactly how everything here is being done. So there's no JavaScript involved, it's all CSS, and it works right off the bat. And that fun thing it has is that it is also fully available. So you can use this in production today. You don't need to, it's not even one of those things where it's like, oh, it's coming out in 5 years. No, this is available right now. You can go and delete all your theme switcher context. You don't have to be burdened by that anymore. So basically, this is one of the pseudo selectors that CSS has, that lets you target specific elements in CSS, and you can make changes to your code using this. So the idea behind this is it encourages you to think in a, what if I didn't have to use JavaScript for this kind of way? If I'm just checking if an input is clicked or not, what if I didn't have to use JavaScript for that? But like I said earlier, the point of this talk is to show you how you can use CSS and HTML for displaying, but we still don't need JavaScript for functionality. So for example, if I did want to check if a user has selected or not, I would still need to maybe add their choice to local storage so that the next time they visit the website, I'll show them dark mode instead of light mode. Now that is an example of where JavaScript is needed, because that is functionality, and that is something that is actually off the page. But if the user does not have access to light or dark mode, that doesn't actually affect the display of the page. At the end of the day, it's still giving the user the ability to choose which page they want. JavaScript is just supporting that ability by storing their preference. So yeah, these are the kind of examples we're going to be looking at. So I think that was that for has. Up next, we have one of my personal favorites, an accordion. I love accordions because it's like, what if you could take all this content and just shove it into a small thing and put it on the page? It's a delightful concept. Huge fan of accordions. So let's take a look at the accordion demo. Basically how we would build this using JavaScript. Dun, 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 dun. This is our JavaScript here, lots of lines of code, and this is our accordion. So it's a simple accordion. You click the toggle blah, 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 and it toggles itself. Now let's look at how we would build this. This time we're using HTML, not CSS. So let's see how this would work. No JS. But it still works. What? Woo! All right, so basically now what we're going to look at is an example of a semantic element that is used in place of JavaScript. So let's take a look at the code once more. This is how we write the JavaScript. Boo, it sucks, no. This is the HTML. Yay, HTML, it's great. Basically, what we're using here is the details element. Details has been around for a very long time, but it's always so interesting to me that every time I pick it up, somebody's like, oh, I didn't know about that. Like, I thought everybody knew about this. But in case you didn't, details, it's great. The details element is basically a semantic element that allows you toggle content display. So you can shorten content in the same way that an accordion works. Now, details is great because it has so many other features that building a custom accordion or building an accordion in JavaScript doesn't have. And I'm going to show you some of those features in a bit. And that great thing about details, it is also fully supported. So you can use it in production today. There's nothing stopping you. Go do it right now. Bring out your laptops, everybody. Don't do that. Anyway, let's take a look at what is actually happening in this accordion in the DevTools panel. All right, so this is our accordion here. I'm going to go into this little panel here called accessibility, which is very important. Next talk coming up, wink, wink. So this is what is happening. We have this button, and this is the content of our accordion. But what we'll notice down here, sorry, let me zoom in case you all can see. Is that better? Excellent, great. What is happening down here is that we see the layout of this page, and this is marked as just a button, and then this is static text. If we go up here, this is generic, and this is ignored. If we go up here, also generic. Basically, what this means is that to any screen reader reading this text, it's not communicating to them what is actually happening on this page. All it's saying is that there's some text on the page, but the screen reader doesn't have any context as to what's actually happening. And that thing we can look at is here, I don't care what's new in DevTools, get out. If we, let me drag that up a bit, toggle this accordion, you notice that apart from like this class name being added, which is what we're using to actually handle the accordion, there is no communication as to whether this thing is active or not. So if I was using a screen reader, for example, and I click that button, it's not telling me, okay, now this thing can be displayed or this thing can't be displayed. This is one of the issues with using JavaScript or custom components. Unless you are very aware of all the accessibility requirements, you're going to need to do a lot of customization to achieve what semantic HTML already has inbuilt. So let's take a look at that. Yeah. All right, give me a sec. Okay, now this is our details element in HTML. So we see that it has a bit of a different layout than the JavaScript one. For example, if I close this, you see that it toggles whether it's opened or not. And that very important thing is that once details is opened, the paragraph attribute actually appears here. Meaning that when details is opened, it automatically updates itself to let screen readers know, oh, this thing now has more content inside. Meaning that if I was using a screen reader and I clicked on this accordion, I'll be aware that, okay, this thing is open and it has more content. Another thing that details does that's really cool is this thing right here. If you look down here, you'll notice that this says expanded true. And if I minimize that, I have to click it again. You notice that now it says expanded false. Now, I've not done anything other than just creating the details element, but it already has all these accessibility requirements like focused, focusable, and expanded inbuilt into it. So this is one of the very important things when it comes to using semantic HTML. You're taking advantage of what the browser already has inbuilt, and it's making it, this was much easier to build than the other accordion. I didn't even need to do any work. It's great. Let's talk some more about why the details element is great. I'm actually a huge fan of details, which is why there's so much on this part of the page. Let's say, for example, we had an error in our code. So let's put an error here. Right? So hopefully this won't work. There we go. We can't use this accordion anymore. So like I'm clicking it and it's not doing anything. What this means is if you have, this is actually preventing a user from accessing content on your page. And that's one of the issues with JavaScript. If you have one error somewhere or like something goes wrong, if you have content that's dependent on JavaScript, users are no longer able to access that content. But when it comes to details, because details is just HTML, so for example, let's say we didn't have any CSS at all, like our page didn't load properly, and we didn't have any CSS, it would still work because it is inbuilt HTML. We don't need to do any work here to like make sure it toggles. So the fact is when you use semantic elements, you're ensuring that your content is always passed across to the user in the way that you intend. And let's see one more cool feature that details has before we move on to the next thing, which is also more details, yay. Basically, one cool, I don't know if it's a Chrome browser thing, but like I've noticed it and I think it's very cool feature. So let's say, for example, I say I want to search something here. So we know that this text has, like, we know this word is in the text. But if I'm searching regularly when I'm using the JavaScript accordion, it doesn't have any way of actually telling me, oh, this is the exact place in the accordion that it's located. But if you're using the HTML details, let's minimize all of that. Ta-da! It opens it by default, and then it points you to the exact text. So like I said, the fact is when you're using all these elements, you're taking advantage of the features that the people that build the web have already said, okay, these things are necessary. Let's imbue them into these features. So use details more. It's cool. Let's talk about more reasons why details are cool. Da-da-da-da. You can also have your details with auto-closing. So sometimes if you have an accordion and you want to, like if I open one accordion, I want to close the other one, you can do that just using HTML as well. So for, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear here, but for S-word and giggles, let's look at what this would be done by with JavaScript. So this is how this would work with JavaScript. You click one, it closes the other one. Fairly straightforward. This is the code for it. Not so straightforward. That's like what? 23 lines of code? That's 20 lines of code too many. Let's look at how this would be done with HTML instead. Once again, no JavaScript. Look, it works, yay! How do we achieve this feature still using the details element? So can you see how our JavaScript has gotten even longer and like bulkier just because we wanted to add a specific feature? We hate that. We don't vibe with that at all. But if you're using details, all you need to do in details to say that, oh, I want this thing to be closed when another one is open, is just add a name feature. So just grouping details by name means that they are automatically linked, and if you open one, it'll close the other one. It's genius, honestly. What? And finally, let's look at one of my favorite features when it comes to CSS, at least something that I've been very excited about. Auto height. Now, who here has ever tried to animate something from height 0 to height auto? Yeah, we all failed, didn't we? Yep. I don't know why, but the CSS gods in their wisdom said that it's not necessary to, it's not an inbuilt feature to have auto heights in something. Meaning that if I want to, like, smoothly expand my div, I can't do that. Or can I? Dun, da, da, da. Look at that. What? Hey, thank you. I know that one person was very impressed. You guys should be more impressed by this. It's very cool. All of this is automatically transitioning the height to move slowly without using any JavaScript at all. But I think one thing you notice is that this is a GIF and not code because it's not published yet. It's an experimental feature. But I think that is another point that I want to make. A reason sometimes that we don't use these new features in the web is because when we hear about them, they're like, oh, this thing isn't supported in Chrome. And I'm like, then why are you telling me I can't use it? What's the point? And by the time it's supported like 5 years later, you've forgotten about it completely. So what I'm trying to pass across is that sometimes we hear about cool new features and then they become supported later and then we're like, oh, I don't care about it anymore. But I think we should still care. We should still keep up to date with what is new in the web and still keep learning how we can use these new features to improve our websites. I dream of the day this thing will be finally automated and we can actually use it. But yeah, let's look at the code here, basically. All this is doing is using calc size auto. Calc size auto is a new experimental CSS feature that calculates the automatic height of a div. So you know how in JavaScript you use like document.getClientHeight or something like that? Calc size auto does that for you in CSS. It calculates the automatic height of a div, and then that's what allows you smoothly transition it. And that thing we're using there is starting style, but I'll talk a bit about that later. As we can see, calc size is not supported anywhere, basically. It's an experimental technology, and I had to run that one in, I think it was Chrome beta. That's why I had to record a GIF of it. But it's something to look forward to, I think. Let's see, what else do we have? Starting style, yeah. So starting style is another feature that goes with calc size auto. So this does something a bit different than what calc size auto does, but I think it's very cool. You know how you're not able to, have you guys ever done like a transition on something that was set as display none, but the transition wasn't smooth at all? Because like the browser technically thinks the element is hidden, and then when display none is set to, everybody's nodding, you get what I'm saying? So starting style is something that is used to offset that. What starting style does is, regardless of whether something is set as display none or visibility hidden, starting style says, okay, it should start at height 0, and this is what allows it to smoothly transition itself. So we use starting style in combination with calc size, and that's what gave us that cool little auto float that we saw. I'm gonna go back to that code just because y'all don't know how happy I was when this thing worked. I was like, oh my God, that's years of my life I'll never get back. But yeah, very cool stuff. Okay, let's see what else we got. Starting style, also limited availability. Shocker. Now let's look at something that doesn't have limited availability. It's a modal. So, yeah, there it is, a modal. You click something and something else pops up on screen. This is something that we have used JavaScript to do for a very long time because we're like, oh, I need to like put a class name and then make the display appear, right? But what if I told you not only could you build this not using JavaScript, but also with only CSS as well? We have 3 demos this time, so y'all are in for a treat. Clearly, I'm very generous. So let's see how we would build our modal using, let's close these tabs. See my bad habit of keeping tabs open now? It's like, close. I have like 48 tabs open on my laptop. I really shouldn't be living like this. Let me get everything out. There we go. So this is our modal in JavaScript, right? You click it, the modal appears, yay, fun stuff. And this is all the code that we have to do to handle that modal. And now, aside from just writing code, when it comes to modals, I think a lot of times that people simplify modals because you don't realize how much work is actually involved in a modal. When you build a modal, not only are you thinking in terms of, making it appear on the screen, are you making sure it gets autofocus? If a user is using a keyboard, are they able to tab into the modal immediately? Are you trapping focus in the modal? You don't want, if the modal is open, can the user go back to the main page or do they stay within the modal? Are you returning focus to the original element when the modal is closed? If I click a button to open the modal and I close it, can I go back to exactly where I was and keep tabbing? Are you closing the modal on blur? So there are a lot of features and a lot of, are you also putting like ARIA labels, ARIA roles, ARIA expanded? There's a lot of features involved in making sure a modal is properly accessible. So instead of doing, oh wait, I didn't show you the rest of the features yet. So now this is our JavaScript modal. So let's look at how we would build this using HTML. Once again, no JavaScript, and yet a modal appears. Woo! All right. And then the CSS one, I mean, obviously I have to use HTML for that, but there are 2 different ways of doing it. So I'm going to show you the CSS one. Yay, it's not as fancy. Let's move on. So this is the JavaScript way of handling a modal. This is like the simplest way of handling a modal if you don't care a lot about accessibility, basically. You make sure the modal is active, you give it focus, and you set the area heading to false. That's all you need to do. When you close the modal, you remove the active class and you set the area heading. This is the lame way of doing it. So if you don't want to be a lame developer, this is what you need to do. There's a new attribute in HTML called popover. Popover is something that allows you to create modals only using HTML. So this has no JavaScript involved. All you need is the popover attribute on the actual item you want to make a modal, and then use the popover target to target the ID, and that is how we had what we have on screen. Popover is also fully supported as of 2025. Woo! So this is something that you can use in your, what is it called? Whatever, you know what it is, right now. And that is great. So let's take a look at the CSS version of doing that. So now this isn't how I would have done the modal with CSS, but I did want to show this because I think this is another cool CSS feature that can be used. There's a CSS feature called target, and what that allows you to do is style an active link. So if you see up there, instead of using a button now, I'm using a href, and the href is pointing to the hashtag modal section, and once that target is active, it updates my modal by itself. So let's go and take a look at the actual CSS first. So this is the modal I'm using. I have the ID modal here, and I have the href modal. This is my CSS code. So it is, let us scroll for that. Isn't live coding fun? Yay. So this is the actual code that handles the CSS. Basically, all I'm saying is that if the modal is not the target, don't display the modal at all. So you see here, if I click it, it works. If I blur out this code, now our modal is present on the screen all the time. So this is an example of how to not use targets, but I couldn't think of another demo, so I just shoved it in here anyway. The point is, target is a cool CSS feature that allows you to target active links. So instead of, you know how, let's say you have a nav, I should have done that demo. Let's say you have a nav, and when a link is clicked, you want to just highlight that link or underscore it. Instead of using JavaScript and saying is active, you can just use targets. But the catch with target is that it only works with hashtag links, like section links. It doesn't work if I say, oh, /contact or something like that. But yeah, I think that was a fun one. Now let's look at the HTML version, which is the real reason we're here. Be gone. So if we look at our HTML here, this is our popover target. And this is the popover div. And this is all that we need. And that cool, let me show you another cool thing with this as well, is that it still works even without CSS. So popover is an attribute that has its own, let me make sure you can see that I really have no CSS here. See, I'm not lying. I was lying. Because I was like, why is the button still styled? I think I have like, you know when you have like a comment somewhere and then, okay, it's this one. Be gone, you. There we go. Now I'm not lying. So popover still works without CSS. So these are all the native features of popover that is inbuilt into the attribute. So for example, I click it, it has autofocus. I click outside, it closes by default. So it has the blur feature built in, it has the autofocus built in, it makes sure that the focus doesn't get trapped in the modal. So popover is a very cool new element that is currently fully supported, and you should be using it to build modals. It's not just for modals, basically, anything that you want to appear on the page. So it can be like your toast notifications, it can be your sidebars, nested sidebars, menus. Go crazy, the world is yours, use popover, yeah. Let's see what else we have here. So targets, once again, fully supported. Now, real quick, how much minutes do I have? Okay, yeah, I'm good on time. We can look at popover with animation, because I want to show you one more animation demo before we move on to a really fun one. So this is just basically zooming into the animation. Ignore the closing parts. Everybody close your eyes. Okay, great. Now see how smooth that opens up? Yay! Ignore the part that doesn't close smoothly. Basically, this is something that we do using the let me find it. This one, popover, open, and starting style. So remember that starting style I mentioned earlier? Basically, all this is the code for animating this. So I'm just saying, once my popover is open, scale it and make it non-opaque. And also, and that cool thing to notice here is that I didn't actually style this one. So this one doesn't have any transform or opacity of itself. Everything was put in the starting style. And the starting style is only on popover open itself. So starting style is a very fun thing. I would recommend you all look into it, because I think it's gonna change the world. I'm running out of time, so let's move on. So yeah, popover open, it does what it says it should do. Finally, and this is my favorite demo of all of them. I feel like I said that about the other demos, but this is actually my favorite one. We're going to animate content using only CSS. I feel like y'all should be more excited for that, but you will be, don't worry. So now this is an example of a simple content on the page. You have the animation, this one fades in, this one slides in, blah, 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 great. Let's look at how we're doing this. So first, if we were building this with JavaScript, and I feel like as any developer that's ever had to build like scroll animations, like a designer gives you something and they're like, oh, can we have parallax scroll on that? And I'm like, can you not? This is something that you would find great. So this is an example of how we would animate things with JavaScript, right? It's just using a scroll listener, or you can use an intersection observer too. I'm hip, I know the latest observers. So, and then you're just making sure everything fades in where it's supposed to. This is great and all, but what if we made it better? Dun, 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 dun. Once again, no JavaScript. That'd be so embarrassing if that didn't work. Oh my god. I was like, what's happening? Okay, it worked. Woo! Look at that. That is all CSS, and that is animated exactly the same way it's done. And also, it unanimates as well. Now, how are we doing this? It's magic. I'm a magician. That's the truth. No, I wish. Here, let's take a look at the actual code for this scroll animation. This is the code I needed to write for the scroll animation in JavaScript. This makes me want to hurl. Why would I write this much code just to fade things into a page? This sucks. This is the code that we use to CSS. And frankly, you can ignore the top parts because it's just the animation keyframe. The main thing, the thing doing all the work, is those two lines there, view timeline name and animation timeline. Animation timeline is an experimental feature in CSS that lets you animate things based on either the viewport or the scroll timeline. So for view timeline, it's based on, I can say, oh, if the element is like 25% visible on the page, carry out this animation. For scroll timeline, I can say, if I have scrolled this element by 50%, carry out this animation. So animation timeline is a new feature that helps you target specific animations tied to the view or the scroll. So that's why we can do two cool things like fading the animation when it appears on the page. You can also use it for handling progress bars, basically anything that you ever thought, oh, do I need a scroll observer for that? Maybe you don't. But actually you still do because this is not available either. It's also an experimental feature. But like I said, it is something to look forward to and something to, keep your ear to the ground for when it actually will be available. Another feature that we're using here is the animation range. So basically what this breakdown means is start the animation when the element is 25% on the page and end it when the element is 50% visible on the page. So there's a great tool here that shows you exactly how that works. So we're saying once this element has reached 25%, start the animation, and when it gets to 50%, end the animation. So instead of animation timing, where I'm saying, oh, animate it for 250 milliseconds or something, I'm actually tying my animation to the viewport of the page or the percentage of the element. And if you guys are interested in the scroll-driven animations, which I think you should be because they're cool, but you don't like cool stuff, you can check out this link here. So this is the scroll-driven animations.style. It's a page that has lots of demos on how to use scroll-driven animation in CSS. It's also great because if it ever does become fully published everywhere, this is probably the first place you hear about it. And those are all the demos I have for y'all today. Thank you so much for listening. Woo! All right. One thing I was going to say is that usually I put resources where I'm like, oh, you can go read this article here or read that article here. But like we mentioned, the web is a constantly changing place, meaning that new features might be coming out every day. So as opposed to resources, these are people I would recommend following because they are constantly tweeting or creating videos or creating content about the latest features in the web. You have Una Kravitz, who's the genius developer at Google. You have Kevin J. Powell. He makes great content on YouTube. You have Jay. This guy is a CSS wizard. The thing that man does with CSS should be illegal. And finally, you have Utility Bend. He makes great content on open source UI, on Open UI, which is basically the people that created Popover. So yeah, I would recommend these 4 people if you are interested in keeping up with the latest news in the web. Thank you. I said it in French. Yeah.